right, good morning, Harbor.Church. You guys awake this morning? I hope so. You got an extra hour of sleep. And then as Marilyn said, probably a lot of you got a little bit of a sugar rush and then crashed a little bit. You're like, well, if the kids aren't coming, I'm just going to eat it. But man, I had a lot of trick-or-treaters. I thought I had more last night than I did normally. And, it's just a fun time. A little bit crazy, but it's always good to get the chance to see some of the community. And, man, my kids went out, and then they're like, Dad, how come we can't eat all the candy? I'm like, yeah, because I'm not putting up with that all night. So it's like one piece, and then, like, now I've got this giant cabinet full of crap that they don't need. But, whatever. It's all good. If this is your first time at Harbor.Church, or this is your first time watching, maybe you're tuning in that way, you're watching this on Facebook or checking it out on Vimeo. Maybe you're just listening to this on the podcast. Whatever it is, my name is Josh Adams. I'm the senior pastor here at Harbor.Church, and I'm thrilled that you're with us. I'm just excited that you're checking us out. I know you could do a lot of other things with your time, and you're here listening to a message, and so that means a lot to me, and I'm praying that God speaks to you today and that you come away not just having, checked a box that said, oh, I went to church or I listened to a message, but that God works in your heart. So that's my prayer for you, and I think it's going to be fun as we jump into this second part of a series that we're calling Masks. And it just so happens that we're doing a mask series right during the Halloween season. So you might have seen a lot of masks yesterday and kids coming up in different masks. And I'm going to play off of that a little bit today. But it made me think there's usually two kinds of people when it comes to Halloween and dressing up, or if you're like super spiritual, a harvest festival. But it's Halloween. It's what it is. But when it comes to that, there's the homemade costume people and the store-bought costume people. So I'll show you this picture. This is the idea. Homemade versus store-bought. I want us to vote. I want those of you that are online, I want you to vote. What's your go-to? How do you do it? If you're online, put it in the comments. I want to come back and read it. I want to take a survey today. So how many of you here would say, I'm team homemade? That's where I'm at, team homemade. Okay, team homemade. All right, how many of you would say I'm team store-bought, buying those costumes? You guys got to vote. And I know some of you are like, well, I've done both. Pick the favorite, okay? Pick one. Pick the one that you prefer and vote. One more time. Homemade? How many homemade people? How many store-bought people? Man, I'm going to have to give it to homemade. I'm just barely. What that means is you probably grew up poor. Come on. Now, listen, I'm not saying, I've seen some homemade costumes like the Comic-Con people. They spend like 8 months building a costume. Those are not cheap, crappy costumes. But that was not my childhood experience. My parents were not buying us a costume. They were like, nah, what do we got around the house? What can we make for you today? And I was in the middle of 5 kids, so my parents weren't like going to go out and buy a bunch. My kids don't know that pain. No, I'm just like, what's on eBay? There you go. There, look what you get to be this year, babe. But like my parents are like, okay, take that paper plate, cut 2 holes in it, be whatever mask you want it to be, Josh. I'm like, do I look cool, guys? They're like, what are you, Captain Plate? And I'm like, yeah, that's it. That's all I get to be. Now, I grew up in a Christian home, so like a lot of times my outfits had to be, church appropriate, which basically meant a Bible character. And if you don't know what that means you put on a bathrobe and you tie a towel around your head, and you're like, I'm a Bible character. And then people would be like, what character are you? And then I would go, it doesn't matter. They're all the same. You call me Abraham, John the Baptist, doesn't matter. I got a robe and a towel. And they're like, all right, kid. That's like every kid that's the shepherd in like the nativity scene. That's all you got. You're like, this is it. This is my outfit. This is what my parents thought I should do. And I love it. Like, I didn't know any different. And then, like, you'd hang out with the kid who had, like the working transformer outfit where, like, made noise and moved. And you're like, dang it. I am poor, aren't I? And it works. I don't know if you had fun last night. I hope you did. I don't know what your weekend was like, but you're here, and we are into this series called Masks. And last week, we talked about the mask that covers scars. So I did the Phantom of the Opera mask, and we talked about the kind of mask that we wear that covers up all of our issues, all of our scars, all of our past. That's a very common one. But today, I thought we could talk about one more mask, and it's also very common, and it plays off of what happened last night. Kids wearing masks because they wanted to be something different. They wanted to play a different part, and this is kind of what we're getting into. You might be sitting there going, I don't know what a series about masks has for me. Well, a mask allows me to play a different part, and this is why we're so drawn to a metaphorical mask. You have to be honest today and say, God, where am I maybe being fake? Where am I putting something up that isn't really me? Now, Last week, it was a defense mechanism. And we'll talk more about the defense mechanism of a mask and why we wear masks, sometimes to hide our shame and our guilt or our pain. But there's also the idea of why do you think those kids were wearing masks last night? It wasn't the shame and the guilt in their past. Those kids were wearing masks because it allowed them to pretend to be something else. It allowed them to just be something different, something that they weren't normally. I don't know about you guys. Some of you might have like nerded out and wanted to be like a true historical, character when you dressed up. Like, I'm Abraham Lincoln. Okay, cool. I'm sorry. I know you guys, you got beat up a lot and didn't get picked for dodgeball. All right. But like for me, when I was a kid, man, I wanted to be superheroes. So I'm gonna do superhero masks today. I don't know what you guys wanted, favorite superhero, whatever you wanted to be. Truthfully, Captain America was not my favorite superhero. He was okay. Chris Evans wishes he could have this bod for Captain America. But it did remind me, I like this mask, man. It reminded me of why kids wear masks at Halloween and why we sometimes as adults wear masks, metaphorical masks, even now. It allows us to pretend. Man, I get to be something else. The kids weren't putting on masks because they're like, oh, I'm so ashamed, I'm so whatever. They were like, ooh, I get to be Chewbacca. I get to be, you fill in the blank, whatever you want. Oh my goodness, if I put on a mask, I can be something better than what I am normally. Do you remember that feeling as a kid? It just took a mask in order for you to pretend to be something else. And you could get lost in your imagination. And that was an innocent thing as a kid because, oh man, you could be all kinds of things. And who didn't want to be a superhero, have superpowers, something else like that? That same imagination is what you and I have, battling in our flesh today in some of the masks that we wear. And if last week was shame, then this week we're going to talk about the pretender's mask. We're going to talk about the desire we have to pretend to be something we're not. Last week we cover up the bad. This week we pretend to be extra good. This week we're gonna talk about the fact that we have an ongoing temptation to dress up the outside so that we come off better than what we really are. Now, your temptation, my temptation when we read these passages, when we talk about this subject, is to think about other people who have pretended around us. You're going to see some things and hear some things, and you're going to go, yeah, I know people like that. Now, listen, there's wisdom to realizing when people are being fake with you. There's a wisdom to protecting yourself from phonies and people who might be using you or are going to betray you. There's a wisdom to knowing that, but I would caution you this morning not to lean into thinking about everybody else. Try today just to say, God, I give you permission to show me where I'm pretending. Show me where I'm being fake. Where I'm being fake with my kids, with my parents, with my spouse, with my boyfriend, my girlfriend, my teacher, my students, my boss, my employees. Show me where I'm not being real around my friends. Show me where I'm pretending to be more than I actually am. The pretender's mask, if you want to kind of identify some of this in your own heart, the pretender's mask does a few things for us, and this is why we're drawn to it. First off, I've noticed with a lot of people that pretend, it allows them to throw the first punch. When I pretend, it allows me to throw the first punch. I can go on the offensive right away. I am good. I stand for this. So I will attack everybody who doesn't. And if I go on the offensive, if I act as if though I am everything, I'm all of that in a bag of chips, then I can look down my nose at everybody who doesn't stack up. And if I go and I start attacking everything early, people just assume that I must be really good because I'm so against bad. And this is one of the reasons we like to pretend. One of the other reasons is it lets me live in denial. The pretender's mask lets me live in denial. I don't have to own up that I don't really have superpowers. I don't have to admit that I struggle with this sin as long as I act like somebody who never struggles with sin. I don't have to own up that I have an addiction if I pretend like I don't have an addiction. Do you understand what we do? We tell people, oh, listen, I'm not a gossip. but I trust you with this. And so now I've protected myself from gossiping because I've already declared I'm not a gossip. I know how to keep secrets. Just a matter of fact, the other day somebody told me, and this is how we justify. Let me just be in denial about what's really going on underneath. It also allows me to control the narrative. It allows me to dictate who I think is good and who I think is bad. It allows me to be the judge, jury, and executioner for all the people around me. If I am the superhero, then I will decide who's the villain in my life. Come on now. There's a lot of people that this is their attitude all day long. I am this, so this person is bad, and this person is bad, and this person is bad. And we control the narrative. We begin to tell people who they are and what they are and where they're going to be. Here's the problem with pretenders. And we all pretend, by the way. We all wear a pretend mask every once in a while. Oh, and for the record, sometimes you'll have the scar mask on, and then you'll put the pretend mask on top of it. A lot of us wear multiple masks. The problem with the pretend mask is that you can't tell if I'm being genuine or if I have an agenda. And this is why it hurts. This is why it's going to hurt your relationships. This is why it's going to hurt your friendships. You get so used to pretending that nobody can tell who the real you is and what you're really going after. And you begin to lose sight of who the real you is. You pretend so much that you buy into it. There's an example of this story, of this idea of a pretend mask. And it's not our main text, but it does set the stage, and it's found in Acts chapter 4 and 5. And at the end of Acts chapter 4, the church is just getting started. This is a brand new church. This is brand new Christians. Jesus in chapter 1 is ascended up into heaven. And so the disciples are like, hey, let's go tell people about Jesus. Let's get excited about telling people about what we believe and what we've seen. So they start telling people, and people are like, what? That Jesus guy was the Messiah? And people begin to just surrender. They break down. They begin to invite God into their life. And if you have never done that, if you've never invited Jesus Christ into your heart, it's the single most important decision you can ever make. To surrender yourself to the Son of God who died on the cross for you. And these people are beginning to experience that. They've never felt freedom from their sin before. They've never felt a true purpose for their life until they surrendered to Jesus. And they said, man, we want that. And as people are coming to know Jesus, they're getting saved. And the church is growing, and the church is growing. And they go, what do we do with this forgiveness? And God has given us all of this grace and mercy. What do we do with it? And so their natural reaction to being so blessed was that their response, without pretending, without being fake, their natural response was just to begin to love those around them. And there's an entire message there, church, for what a church should look like. And it gives us an example, and I'm just giving you the example to contrast the pretending later on. At the end of chapter 4, it says this. In verse 32, if you don't have a Bible, we'll put it on the screen. All the believers were united in heart and mind. This is what a church should look like. And they felt that what they owned was not their own, so they shared everything they had. You see a loss of greed, a loss of arrogance, of ego. The apostles testified powerfully to the resurrection of the Lord Jesus, and God's great blessing was upon them all. Whew, I'm getting hot already. Whew. That sounded weird. I meant the lights are hot. I meant the room is hot, like I need some air conditioning, but let's move on. That's really weird. He just says random stuff. Just ignore it, okay? There were no needy people among them. This is a powerful testimony to a time when the world was really broken. Half of them are slaves, and it says as bad as it was around them, as dark as the world was around them, there was nobody in need. Why? Because those who owned land or houses, they would sell them. They would bring the money to the apostles to give to those in need. Here's for instance, a guy named Joseph. We know him as Barnabas. He was nicknamed that because he's the son of encouragement. He was from the tribe of Levi on the island of Cyprus. He sold a field that he owned, and he brought the money to the apostles. Once again, this is just giving us examples of people who weren't pretending. They were just being genuine. This is just how they responded to having Jesus in their life, to being excited about actually having a future. So that's genuine. The very next verse, which starts in chapter 5, says this. But there was a certain man named Ananias, who with his wife Sapphira, they sold some of their property. And he brought part of the money to the apostles, claiming it was the full amount. And here's where he begins to pretend. He's pretending that everything he's offering is 100% all there is. He's like, this is genuinely the truth. This is all I got. But it's just a part of it. And with his wife's consent, that means Ananias and Sapphira were in it together, he kept the rest of the money. And Peter said, Ananias, why have you done this? Why have you let Satan fill your heart? Just so you guys can make parallel connection here. The desire to hide, the desire to be fake, the desire to lie comes from Satan. He is the great deceiver. He's the one that would pretend to be something different in order to interact with people and trick them. This is his design. This pull towards putting on a pretend mask doesn't come from God. That's in your flesh. That's your sin nature. He says, why did you let Satan fill your heart? You lied to the Holy Spirit, and you kept some of the money for yourself. Well, Pastor, I feel like this is being kind of mean. That poor guy sold his field, and he gave some money, and Peter's being a kind of a jerk to him. And I mean, he's just being nice. That's not what Peter's mad about. Peter isn't mad that he didn't get all the money. As a matter of fact, he explains that. The property, verse number 4, was yours to sell or not sell. There's nothing in the Bible about you have to sell your property. It was your choice, Ananias. If you wanted to sell it, sell it. If you don't want to sell it, don't sell it. You could do as you wished. And after you sold it, the money's yours. It's all yours. It's 100% your money. You could give it if you wanted. You could give it away, or you could keep it. It's up to you. But what you did was you lied, bro. How could you do something like this? You weren't lying to us. You were lying to God. And as soon as Ananias heard these words, he fell to the floor and died. And everyone who heard about it was terrified. I would say so. Bro, don't lie. Do not lie. But it speaks to the importance that God was placing on the church to be pure and to be genuine. God, at the very beginning of the church, says, I don't want pretenders. I don't want you to be fake. Being fake is a cancer. It's a cancer in the church, and it's a cancer in your home. It's going to destroy you. It's what's going to eat away at every solid relationship you have. And what you're told, and you hear that whisper from Satan, just be something better than what you are. Just pretend that you don't have those issues. Just pretend to be something really good, and then people will like you. And you'll get a boyfriend, or your kids will do what you want them to do, or your boss will give you the raise, and you begin to hear these lies like, let me pretend. Now listen, I am not saying that you're not supposed to be on a road to improvement. God calls us every day to try to live more like Christ. That is a battle for sanctification to improve. I'm not telling you not to improve. I'm telling you to not pretend like you've already met that improvement. Like, no need for remodeling here. I'm pretty much perfect. Don't look beneath the surface. I can show you right here. This is it. I've reached it. I've attained it. God's really happy with me right where I'm at. I don't need any more work. That's pretending. That's fake. By the way, his wife also comes in, and she lies after he's already dead, and they both end up dying the same day just because they both lied. And this is the pitfall of pretending. If you haven't already latched onto this with last week and with this week, the pitfall of pretending is simply this. I lie to others when I pretend. I lie to myself when I pretend, and it will lead me to lie to God. When I begin to fool other people, I then begin to fool myself. Like, yeah, I mean, I am pretty good. And then in order to justify it, we usually compare ourselves to people who don't pretend as well as we do. We're like, I mean, I'm not perfect, but I'm definitely better than them. And so our mask begins to look good to us. And once we do that long enough, we begin to believe that God actually believes our mask. As if though he didn't truly create us, we actually have prayers where we think we're convincing God that we're as good as we're trying to convince everybody else. Or we just ignore God like he's just totally cool with my actions. This is not true. And although I can't find a place in the Bible that has like real physical masks. There are a few. We're going to look at a passage later with some face coverings. There's a lot of metaphorical masks, and Jesus actually references a lot of times the idea of people wearing masks. You may not have noticed it because he calls it a different word. Remember, Jesus spoke Aramaic, and a lot of the Bible was translated into Greek. That was the language of the day, the scholarly language. So a lot of what we have is that. And as Jesus walked around, he actually talked to people that he knew were wearing masks. Jesus repeatedly, more times than we can looked at people and said, "You're wearing a mask. You're a mask wearer." Now, you may not have seen this because you're not reading it the way it was written. We're reading it for us. What they had and where Jesus would encounter these people and call them out for being two-faced, for wearing masks, he would use this Greek word right here, and we'll put it up. And it's translated hypocrites. Now, if you don't read Greek, that's okay. I took classes on it, and I still don't read it. But like, it's a unique word that Jesus is using here that gets translated hypocrites, which is the word that we have today, hypocrites. And the word hypocrites was used for actors back in the day. It was used to describe, you guys got to remember, they didn't have television. And they didn't have, all the stuff that we have. So when they wanted to get the news out, when they wanted to talk about a battle or just relive a big accomplishment or just entertain people, they would pretend to be famous people. So they would put on a mask of Julius Caesar, or they would put on a mask of Alexander the Great. They would put on masks so that these actors could come out and pretend to be somebody they're not. And they would act out things. And you knew that the actor isn't really a mean dictator, or the actor isn't really that. Heck, half the time, the men, because they wouldn't let women do it, the men would have to put on women's masks and pretend to be women. You knew that the person wearing the mask wasn't the real person. You just knew that. They were a hypocrite. There's somebody who has two faces. There's somebody who's pretending to be something, but it's not really who they are. So it wasn't always an insult. But then Jesus starts hanging out with people. Jesus starts hanging out with religious people, church people, people who pretended to be better than everybody else around them, people who looked down their nose at the people around them. Jesus hung out with religious leaders, scholars, scribes, Pharisees, Sadducees, the Sanhedrin. Jesus hung out with these people, and he was constantly annoyed with them. You want to find times where Jesus is frustrated, annoyed? It's because he's hanging out with religious people. And Jesus spends a lot of time hanging out with sinners, corrupt, messed up, jacked up, dumpster fire of people, prostitutes, like I said, thieves, just the people that society didn't want. Jesus would go to parties with them. And you don't ever see Jesus being mad at them. He's like, "You guys, what's going on here?" Jesus, by the way, never condoned their sin. You'll never find one time where Jesus was okay with their sin. But Jesus loved them. And he could deal with them because they were up front. They're like, "Yeah, this is my job. This is what I do." And Jesus is like, "Hey, there's better for you than this." He wasn't frustrated with them because they were broken, because Jesus knows that we're all broken. He was frustrated with the people who pretended they weren't broken. What I'm talking about today is if you're wearing the pretender's mask and you're acting like you're not broken, God hasn't got a place yet in your heart where he can work on you, because you closed the door because you're like, "I'm not broken, Jesus. They're broken. Deal with them." And he's like, "I can deal with them because they are at least admitting it, step one. So now I can step in and begin to heal. I can't do anything with you because you're pretending so hard that you don't have issues. So I'm just standing here knocking, going like, "You going to take the mask off? You want me to do some work today?" "Nah, I'm pretty good." That doesn't work with God. This is how Jesus talks to them. He's trying to let them understand it's very broken. I'm just picking a couple. Go read the New Testament. Go read the Gospels and watch how many times Jesus is like, "Guys, here's what's broken with you. Here's what's wrong with you." I'm picking a couple because this is all we have time for. But when Jesus looks at the people he loves, and by the way, he loves the Pharisees just as much as he loves the people at the party. Some just loved him back and some didn't. Some didn't want to be told, and this is where I started today's message. Some of them didn't want to be told that they're two-faced. To be exposed as faking pretending hurts. And our response to being hurt is sometimes, yeah, I screwed up, I need to fix it. And sometimes it's we cross our arms and go, I don't want to hear what he has to say. And sometimes we leave church or the temple mad at what it is that God's trying to tell us. So lean in. This is what he says. Verse number 13 of Matthew chapter 23. He goes to a party, and they're mad at him for not doing all the rituals for the party. And he goes, what sorrow awaits you, teachers of religious law, church people who pretend you've got it all together. What sorrow awaits you, you Pharisees, you hypocrites. Remember, he's saying, you two-faced, mask-wearing liar. Ugh. Talk about the party like the DJ just dropped the beat right there. And Jesus is like, hey, hold up, hypocrites. You shut the door of the kingdom of heaven in people's faces. You won't go in yourselves, and you don't let other people enter either. What sorrow awaits you, you teachers of religious law, and you Pharisees, hypocrites, exclamation point. For you cross land and sea to make one convert, and then you turn that person into twice the child of hell that you yourselves are. This is heavy stuff. This is why he's frustrated at people who are claiming to be close to God being pretenders. Because when you represent to the world around you the path forward, when you leave and you go, yeah, I'm a Christian, I know Jesus, I have a relationship with him. If that's what you claim, and then you go out there and you live nothing like it, you're not just being a bad example, you're actually leading people in the wrong direction. Because we pretend so much, we're pretending like I'm somebody you should follow. Follow me, look at me. And you may not be saying that, but they're lost and they're in darkness and they're looking for hope. And they see your Facebook post or they look at your t-shirt or they hear you talking about church and they're like, well, she's somebody that might have answers. He's somebody that I might be able to follow after. And so they begin to watch you even though you don't know they're watching you. And they begin to listen to you even though you don't know that they're listening to you. And you're just blindly leading them off of a cliff because you're pretending like you know where you're going and you're not actually going there. I got to take a drink. Give me a second. Your false directions are never going to lead to a true destination. Hear me out, because this is where my heart breaks for some of you. You're faking it, and you don't understand the destruction that you're leading your family into. I spent 10 years as a youth pastor. The amount of times I heard a kid tell me, hey, Josh, I hear what you're saying and I see what you're doing, but my dad comes here and he doesn't look anything like this when we're not at church. I've never seen my mom pray. She comes and pretends. I've never seen my dad open a Bible. My parents never talk about God outside of church. You're fake. And you think nobody's going to notice because you put on the facade. It doesn't take very long for the people who truly spend time with us to know what we truly believe. You're faking it for your kids in hopes that they somehow grow up with morals and character, but they're watching mom and dad do one thing on Sunday and then do something completely different the rest of the week, and they're going, hypocrites. I don't need this. Your coworkers see you post Bible verses because, man, I love Jesus. But then they watch you cuss out your boss when he turns his back. And they go, she may not be as filled with the Spirit as she says she is. They hear you talk about your love for God, but then they notice that you are just as quick to jump in on the lust train when somebody walks by and your comments are just as broken as theirs are, and they go, wherever they're leading, it's fake. And this is what we've done. We're so eager to be fake, we don't realize what we're ruining. And this is true in the church, it's true in our homes. Jesus doesn't leave it there. He goes on in verse 23. He says, what sorrow awaits you, teachers of religious law, you Pharisees, hypocrites. He's just driving the point home. He wanted to make sure they didn't forget who he was talking to. For you're careful to tithe even the tiniest income from your herb gardens, but you ignore the more important aspects of the law, like justice, mercy, and faith. Yeah, you should tithe. Amen. But do not neglect the more important things. I've told you this 1,000 times. God is not interested in your money. He's interested in your heart. You're the one who ties your heart so closely to your money. He's teaching you to let go. And in this situation, they were justifying. These guys aren't not giving. These guys are giving. And it's still not right. This is the whole point. Don't give to ease your conscience. It says if you do it begrudgingly, just keep it. If you walk by one of those boxes, or if you go online to tithe to Harbor and you're like, oh, I hate that I have to do it, but I hope it makes me look good, just keep it. God isn't interested in you proving to other people how great you are. He wants your heart to be soft, to go, God, you've given me 100% of everything I have. My time, my talents, my testimony, and yes, my treasure. The easiest, most identifiable way for me to give back is to take a piece of my treasure and trust you with it. So I'm going to do that to teach my flesh that my flesh doesn't get to control everything else. But if you can't do that in a step of faith, he's saying, I want your heart to be in it. And what these guys are doing is they are tithing. They're like, here's my money, here's my money. Go read the story of the widow lady who drops 2 mites versus all these other people dropping all their coins and making a big show of all their money. And God goes, she gave more than they did. Because he knows what the sacrifice was going on there. He wasn't interested in the amount of money. He was interested in their heart. And so when he does this passage, he's saying, you're focusing on the wrong things, guys. You're putting a little money to ease your conscience so that you don't have to focus on stuff like justice and mercy and faith. You're just giving a little bit so you don't have to worry about everything else. You could go, hey, I'm good. This is what a pretender does. The pretender focuses on the little bit that they do so that they can claim everything else is really good. What we do is we have minor goals, but they lead to empty victories. Our minor goals give us a chance to be like, this is what I've accomplished. And we talk about all these victories that people on the surface are like, man, those guys must be super spiritual. They tithe even off the littlest bit of their herb garden. Those guys must be super spiritual. And so they're claiming this big victory over here, but because it has no justice, no mercy, no faith, it's shallow. It's empty. This is true for us in a lot of different ways. We'll kill our families and begin to destroy them for the victory of having a post on Instagram that everybody likes. And our family's looking at us like, this is so fake, whatever. And listen, I know most pictures are fake, but I'm talking about deeper beneath that. Sometimes we'll ruin a marriage or a relationship just because we're so eager to have people tell us that we are the victim and that we are justified in our anger and our hatred. And we look for these small little things that we can accomplish, like look at me, look what I've got, look what I'm dealing with, validate me, pat me on the back. And we think it makes us better, but what we've actually done is we've created a shallow victory, something that doesn't really help. That's why our marriages aren't getting stronger. That's why our relationships aren't healthier. We pretend that we haven't done anything wrong, and we try to gain everybody on our side as if though that justifies me in how I treat my friend or my cousin or my spouse. And what it really does is we got people to give us a thumbs up. They don't know the real story. They're seeing your pretend. And then you feel good about all the crap you've done. And nothing's fixed. Nothing is better. We do that at work. We'll literally destroy a coworker to make an extra sale or get a raise behind them, and we act like that's the big victory, and we don't see all the damage that we've done. This is the same thing that the Pharisees did all the time. He continues on. He calls them blind guides. You strain your water so you don't accidentally swallow a gnat, but you're swallowing a camel. He's speaking hyperbole here, but he's doing it to make a point. You're so concerned about this itty-bitty little thing, and yet this giant problem is what you're bringing into your life. Some of you are so concerned that people think this about you that you're creating on the back end something that's going to rob you of relationships. Your kids 10 years from now are not going to talk to you because of this thing you're doing over here just to make sure that your friends think that you're a really cool parent. You're going to end up in divorce because you care more that your friend tells you that you're right and they're wrong. And so you begin to act out to have these small things. And this is what pretending does. He goes on to verse 25. He says, what sorrow awaits you, you teachers of religious law, you Pharisees, you hypocrites. For you're so careful to clean. I love this. If you don't lean into anything else, lean into this. You're so careful to clean the outside of the cup and the dish, but inside you're filthy. You're full of greed and self-indulgence. You blind Pharisees, first wash the inside of the cup and the dish, and then the outside will become clean too. They're very practical. Give your kids a cup, they go outside and play with it. They make sandcastles and mud pies, and they put bugs in it, and it's just covered in junk. If they bring that cup back inside to be used to drink out of, and all you do is wipe down the outside of the cup so that it looks pretty sitting on the shelf, but the inside is crusted mud and dirt and twigs and, I don't know, a grasshopper that they caught, it's just garbage. Nobody wants to drink out of that cup. It doesn't matter if it sits on the shelf and it looks pretty, because that's what we care, isn't it? We want people to go by and go, man, her cups are really clean. Boy, he's got his cups in order. Because they're not looking on the inside. The value of the cup is that it refreshes your soul. It's to be filled with water. And there's nothing about that cup that should be filled. Some of us, listen, I know messages like today kind of suck because it's like, give me something fun, Pastor Josh. Let's go. It's going to be a lot more fun when your cup is clean and God can pour into your life so that you can be refreshed and refilled and you can pour into other people. That's where you're going to find the joy and the excitement when you're real. And by real, I mean really clean, not fake clean. This message hurts because I have to look in the mirror too and go, Josh, you're full of crap sometimes. Boy, you really want to try hard to be this pastor that people would love and respect. But are you actually doing real work with God? Are you giving God real access to your heart? Or are you just pretending so that everybody's like, oh, he's got it together? Because I can fake having it together, but God doesn't buy my fake. God's like, hey, what are you really praying for here? What are you really doing right there? How are you really leading your family? What are you really concerned about? It's not easy to take a hard look in the mirror, but when we do it, then we go, God, the inside of this cup is really dirty and really jacked up. Will you please clean me? Because there's no way I'm going to bless my wife or bless my kids or bless my employees or bless my friends or be the kind of neighbor or be the kind of person that you've called me to be if the inside of the cup is dirty. So I don't care what people think about the outside. What I care is that you clean the inside. And what he says is when you let him clean the inside, then the outside gets made better. Do you guys see how that works? What you need to take away from that is that surface solutions won't fix core corruption. And some of you, pretending makes you focus only on the surface. Pretending makes you think if this is fixed, it's the outside of the cup, people will assume the cup is clean. And they will. Here's the problem. They actually will. If I see a cup sitting in your cabinet and it's clean on the outside, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt that it's clean on the inside. But if we're friends and we're around each other long enough, eventually I'm going to take that cup to get a drink and I'm going to go, wow, I didn't know how gross they were. And how many times do our friendships or our relationships crumble when somebody gets to take a look at the inside of the cup? That's why some of us keep people away, because we're like, hey, just look at my cup from a distance. Don't be nosing around, getting all close in person, wanting to be friends. Friends want to know about the inside of the cup, but I don't want you to know about the inside of the cup. Just me? Okay, cool. The last verse that Jesus says here is this: what sorrow awaits you, teachers of religious law, Pharisees, hypocrites. You're like whitewashed tombs, beautiful on the outside, but filled on the inside with dead people's bones and all sorts of impurity. Outwardly, you look like righteous people, but inwardly, your hearts are filled with hypocrisy and lawlessness. The way Luke writes it, he says, you're out there dancing in a field with flowers, and you don't realize it's actually graves. Because you're so concerned about the surface level, you don't know that there's dead bodies underneath you. That's how he says that same passage. What they're saying is these whitewashed tombs, these tombs have been made to be pretty. They're like painted the tombs and they planted flowers. They put a nice little sign that they found on Pinterest. And they're like, yay, the tombs look great. It's what's on the inside of the tomb is this death, this decay, this rot. And he's trying to paint a picture to them. Because we hear messages like this, Whether it's me or it's something you're reading on the Bible, your own, God is trying to tell us, stop pretending, stop being fake. It looks good. It looks good to pretend to be a superhero because it dresses up the outside, and now you're impervious, and we'll talk about defenses again. We'll talk about our need to not be vulnerable. But we just love to pretend because maybe people will like me more. Maybe somebody will finally love me. Maybe I'll get respect. We come up with a lot of reasons why we pretend, but the whole point of what Jesus is trying to teach them is that when you pretend, you're lying to others, you're lying to yourself, and you're lying to God, and you begin to believe it. And what happens is you begin to dance on fields that are actually graves. You begin to decorate the outside of these tombs, forgetting that the inside is death and decay. And so I wrote this for me, and maybe it means something to you, that if I continue to deny, it's going to lead to concealed decay. My ongoing pretending, if I keep pretending, if I keep acting like there's nothing going on, eventually I'll forget that it's a graveyard. And I'll just be like, look at my field full of flowers. Look at my really cool wall that's painted. And I forget that it's actually a tomb. I forget that there's death going on, that there's decay and rot going on underneath the surface. Some of you feel the pain of what I'm saying right now because you've been playing along so much that you're now at the place where it is just decay. You see the decay. You see it in your marriage. You see it in your home. You see it with your best friend. You see it in your classmates or your teammates. You see it with your coworkers. You see it with your brother and sister. You're jacked up and you don't know why, and you're going, man, it just feels like everything's rotten. Job describes it this way. You got to remember, Job and his friends had a lot of conversations about what it looks like to be genuine. And it says this in Job chapter 8, verse 13. So are the paths of all those who forget God. The hope of the hypocrite shall perish, whose confidence shall be cut off, whose trust is a spider's web. The hypocrite is someone who trusts in a spider web. The spider web is meant to entangle you. The spider's smart. The spider knows that if they can make that web disappear enough, you'll accidentally fly into it, thinking it's not that big of a deal. And then you get wrapped up. Is it any surprise that our adversary is called a lion that wanders about, seeking whom he may devour? Satan is looking for people, the hypocrite, who thinks it's no big deal to be fake. And then he gets you in the web. And once you land in that web of pretending, it's just a matter of time before you get wrapped up and you suffer the death of 1,000 bites. This is what Job is trying to explain to the person who is fake. Later on in the same book, it says, for what is the hope of the hypocrite? Though he may gain much. And this is the battle that we're talking about today. There is a lot to be gained from being a hypocrite. I pretend so that I get people to think I'm better than I am. I like people thinking I'm better than I am. And if you're honest, so do you. I don't want people to know how jacked up I am. I don't want people to know all of my issues. I like to think that I'm better. I want people to think that I've actually arrived. There's a lot to be gained from being fake. But what he says is, what does it matter if God takes away his life? What does it matter, all the stuff you gain here on this world, if being fake keeps you from God and ultimately keeps you from heaven? What if all of the things you gain by pretending that you're not as broken as you actually are is the very thing that keeps God out of your life? Not because God doesn't want to be a part of your life, not because God doesn't love you, but because you've pretended so long, you've lied to yourself that you don't actually need God. You've lied to yourself to the point that if you can just keep faking it, eventually you're going to make it, and therefore God doesn't need to play a role and you don't have to surrender to him. I'll leave you with what it says in Proverbs. It says, there's a way that seems right unto man. There's a path that seems like, oh, that's the right path. That'll make sense. But the end of that path is death. There's a desire to pretend. There's a desire to fake it. But the end of that is going to be death. It's going to be the death of your relationships. It's going to be the death, hear me, it's going to be the death of people's ability to trust you, because they won't. I said at the beginning, they won't be able to tell if you're being genuine or if you have an agenda. You've pretended so much, they won't know. Is mom being honest? Is my friend playing me, or are they being serious? Is my son lying, or is that who he really is? They don't know if they can trust you anymore. And it's not only the death of your relationships, but it may be the death of your walk with God. Not because God doesn't love you, and not because he isn't patient and merciful, but because you've pretended so much that you've made no room for an honest talk with God. Would you be honest with God today? As I pray out loud, would you pray and have an honest conversation with the God who loved you so much he died for you? He loved you so much he sacrificed his life to cover your sin. It's going to require you to not pretend. You're going to have to be honest and go, I need that forgiveness. I need to be real. God, I'm embarrassed that I'm not as good as I want to be. And so I'm tempted to just give up. But today, I'm going to resolve myself that you've got a better plan, that if I just start working on the inside of the cup, you'll make the outside cleaner than I could ever make it. So I'm going to trust you today. I don't know what your prayer needs to be, but I hope it's something like that. Will you bow your heads with me? Dear Heavenly Father, Lord God, I thank you so much for every person under the sound of my voice right now. And I know, God, that you have a plan for us that involves us just being honest. God, so many people weren't willing to take a hard look in the mirror when they met you. They wanted you to fix other people's problems. They wanted you to fix surface issues. And what you came to do was you came to bring life. You came to deal with our hearts. God, I pray for the person right now who is struggling to trust you. God, I know there's somebody right now that needs to put their faith in you for the very first time. God, I pray that they would open their heart and invite you in, that they would surrender to you right now. God, I pray that we would trust you with everything, that we would allow you to be our Lord and Savior, not just to take away our sin, but God, also to give us a plan going forward. God, would you help us? God, would you help me? Help each and every one of us be real. The temptation to pretend, the temptation to be fake, it's so strong, and we're so scared of what it looks like to be honest. But God, it's that honesty that you value. It's that willingness just to surrender to you that matters most. So God, we ask in this moment that we wouldn't shy away from the painful truth, that we wouldn't look to blame other people, that we wouldn't think about other people being fake, that in this moment we would admit that you've called us to be even more real, more honest with others, with ourselves, and especially with you. God, we need you. Our sin is strong, our flesh is strong, but God, we know that you're stronger, and so we lay it down right now, the desire to just clean the outside. God, would you clean us from the inside out? Would you do a work that allows us to be the kind of men and women, sons and daughters that you've called us to be? And then, God, I pray that you would bless those who are willing to take that step. Would you transform their relationships? Would you do a work in their families, in their homes? God, would you do a work in their community, their workplace, their school, their neighborhood? God, as we trust you, God, we know that your plan is greater than ours. And so we lay that down at your feet right now, and we ask it in your precious and holy name. Amen.